Traoré enters school without security, and what he says to children goes viral. President Ibrahim Traoré's motorcade was traveling through the dusty streets of Koudougou when he spotted something that made him tap the driver's shoulder urgently. "Stop here," he commanded, pointing toward a modest primary school where children could be seen playing in a small courtyard during their afternoon break. The École Primaire, Thomas Sankara, named after Burkina Faso's revolutionary leader, sat behind a simple fence with peeling paint and a handwritten sign announcing its dedication to education for all children. His security detail immediately tensed as the presidential vehicle came to an unexpected halt. Colonel Bambara, his chief protection officer, turned around with obvious concern. "Mr. President, this stop isn't on our schedule. We haven't conducted security sweeps or established protocols for this location." Traoré was already unbuckling his seatbelt, his eyes fixed on the children who had noticed the official vehicles and were gathering curiously at the fence. Some pointed excitedly while others hung back shyly, clearly recognizing the presidential insignia but uncertain about what this unexpected visit might mean for their ordinary school day. "Sometimes the most important visits are the unplanned ones," Traoré replied, his hand already on the door handle. "These children deserve to know that their president sees them, knows they exist, and cares about their future." At 34, Traoré had built his political reputation on exactly this kind of spontaneous connection with ordinary citizens. His rise to power had been fueled by widespread frustration with leaders who remained isolated in palaces while claiming to serve the people. Now, 18 months into his presidency, he continued to resist the bubble of security and protocol that typically surrounded heads of state. "Sir, please," Colonel Bambara pleaded, "at minimum allow us to conduct a perimeter check and establish basic security measures. There are protocols for a reason." Traoré paused, recognizing the legitimate concerns of his protection team, while feeling the pull of the moment before him. Through the vehicle's windows, he could see more children gathering at the fence, their faces bright with curiosity and excitement. Teachers had begun appearing as well, clearly flustered by the unexpected presence of the presidential motorcade outside their humble school. "5 minutes," he told his security chief. "Send 2 officers to speak with the school administration and ensure there are no obvious concerns. But I will not turn a simple school visit into a military operation that frightens these children." His communications director, who had been frantically checking his phone for schedule adjustments, looked up with concern. "Mr. President, we have the Chinese trade delegation meeting in Ouagadougou this afternoon. Any delay could create diplomatic complications." "The Chinese have waited months to discuss their proposals," Traoré replied calmly. "They can wait an extra hour while I speak with children who rarely see their government representatives. Our future depends more on these students than on any foreign trade agreement." The security team reluctantly began implementing minimal protection protocols, while Traoré observed the growing crowd of children at the school fence. Their enthusiasm was infectious. Some waved excitedly while others chattered among themselves about the unprecedented event unfolding at their school. Several teachers attempted to organize the children into more orderly lines, but their excitement proved difficult to contain. One small girl, perhaps 7 years old, had climbed onto the fence to get a better view of the presidential vehicles. Her uniform was patched and faded, but her smile was radiant as she waved enthusiastically toward the tinted windows. This image, a poor child greeting her president with pure joy, encapsulated exactly why Traoré felt compelled to make this unscheduled stop. "Security sweep complete," reported one of his officers through the radio. "School administration is honored by your visit. No apparent threats detected, though we cannot guarantee comprehensive protection without more extensive preparations." Traoré nodded and opened his door before anyone could raise further objection. The moment his feet touched the ground, a cheer erupted from the children at the fence, their excitement now impossible to contain. Teachers gave up attempting to maintain order as students pressed against the fence, eager to catch a glimpse of their young president. "Monsieur le Président," several children called out in French, while others shouted greetings in local languages. The genuine enthusiasm of their welcome created an atmosphere of celebration that contrasted sharply with the formal, heavily secured events that typically characterized presidential appearances. As Traoré approached the school gate, the head teacher, A middle-aged woman in a colorful traditional dress hurried forward with obvious nervousness and excitement. "Mr. President," she said, slightly breathless, "we are deeply honored by your unexpected visit. I am Madame Caboret, the director of this school." "The honor is mine, Madame Caboret," Traoré replied warmly, extending his hand in greeting. "I hope you don't mind the intrusion, but I saw your students and felt compelled to meet the future leaders of our nation." His words and demeanor immediately put the school administrator at ease, while the children's excitement reached fever pitch as they realized their president intended to enter their school and speak with them directly. Several students had pulled out mobile phones to record the unprecedented moment, creating the first documentation of what would soon become a viral sensation across social media platforms. The simple act of walking through the school gate without elaborate security preparations or formal protocols sent a powerful message about accessibility and connection that would resonate far beyond this modest primary school in Kodugu. As Traoré stepped into the courtyard, surrounded by dozens of excited children, he was about to deliver words that would be shared millions of times across Africa and beyond. Inside the modest classroom of the École Primaire Thomas Sankara, 43 children aged between 6 and 10 sat in wooden desks that had seen better days. The walls displayed educational posters about mathematics, geography, and Burkina Faso's history, while a chalkboard at the front bore the remnants of that morning's French lesson. When President Traoré entered with Madame Caboret, the excited chatter fell to reverent silence as the children stared wide-eyed at their unexpected visitor. "Please, children, remain seated," Traoré said gently, noting their instinct to stand formally in the presence of authority. "I'm here as your friend, not as someone who requires ceremony." He surveyed the classroom with genuine interest, taking note of the cracked walls, the shortage of textbooks, and the improvised teaching materials that spoke to both the school's resource constraints and the creativity of its educators. Despite these challenges, the atmosphere radiated the same hope and determination that had characterized his own educational journey, from humble circumstances to national leadership. "Who can tell me what you learned today?" he asked, settling onto a small plastic chair that one of the teachers had quickly provided. The informal seating arrangement, the president of Burkina Faso sitting at child level, created an intimate atmosphere that encouraged participation. Several hands shot up immediately, with children eager to share their lessons about mathematics, reading, and social studies. A 10-year-old boy named Amadou stood to recite a poem about African unity that they had been studying, while a girl named Fatoumata proudly displayed her notebook filled with careful handwriting exercises. "These are excellent achievements," Traoré praised, his genuine enthusiasm evident to both the children and their teachers. "But I want to ask you about something more important than any lesson you might find in a textbook." The classroom fell silent again, as 43 pairs of young eyes focused intently on their president. Outside, more students and teachers had gathered at the windows, straining to hear what their leader would share with this small group of primary school students. "I want to talk to you about dreams," Traoré continued, his voice taking on the intimate tone of someone sharing important secrets. "Not the dreams you have when you sleep, but the dreams you have for your future, for your families, for your country." 8-year-old Salimata raised her hand tentatively. "Mr. President, my grandmother says dreams are for rich people. Poor people like us should focus on surviving each day." The question cut to the heart of the systemic inequality and limited opportunities that had motivated Traoré's political career. Rather than offering empty platitudes, he leaned forward with the seriousness the question deserved. "Your grandmother has wisdom born from difficult experience," he acknowledged, "but I want to tell you something that might change how you think about dreams and poverty." He paused, gathering his thoughts, before delivering what would become one of the most quoted speeches in African political history. "I grew up in a village smaller than Kodugu, in a house with mud walls and no electricity. My father was a farmer who could barely read, and my mother sold vegetables in the market to help feed our family. We were poor in money, but rich in something more important. We had dreams that refused to accept poverty as permanent." The children listened with rapt attention as their president shared details of his own humble origins, details that resonated powerfully with their lived experiences. "When I was your age, Sitting in a classroom much like this one, adults told me that poor children should be grateful for basic education and not reach too high. They said that leadership was for people from important families, not for village boys like me. 9-year-old Yakuba, emboldened by the president's openness, raised his hand. But how did you become president if people said you couldn't? Traoré smiled at the directness of the question. Because I learned the most important lesson anyone can learn. Poverty is not a character flaw, and wealth is not a guarantee of worth. Intelligence, courage, and determination exist in every village, every neighborhood, every family. The only question is whether we create opportunities for these qualities to flourish. He stood and walked closer to the students, his presence filling the small classroom with energy and possibility. Look around this room, he instructed. Among you are future doctors who will heal the sick, engineers who will build roads and bridges, teachers who will educate the next generation, and yes, leaders who will guide our nation toward greater prosperity and justice. The impact of his words was immediately visible in the children's faces, which had transformed from polite attention to active engagement and growing excitement. But here's what I want you to remember most, Traoré continued, his voice rising with passion. Your dreams are not selfish wishes. They are investments in Burkina Faso's future. Every time you study hard, every time you help a classmate, every time you stand up for what's right, you're building the country we all want to live in. Madame Traoré, who had been quietly observing from the back of the classroom, began wiping tears from her eyes as she watched her students absorb these life-changing words from their nation's leader. Don't let anyone tell you that your background determines your destination, Traoré declared with finality. I'm standing here today as proof that a poor village boy can serve his entire nation. Each of you has the same potential within you. The classroom erupted in spontaneous applause as the children processed the revolutionary idea that their circumstances of birth need not limit their aspirations or achievement. Several students had already begun recording portions of the speech on their phones, documentation that would soon spread far beyond this modest classroom in Koudougou. As the applause died down, President Traoré gestured for the children to settle back into their seats. Now I want to hear your questions, he announced, not the polite questions adults might expect, but the real questions you think about when you're lying in bed at night or walking to school in the morning. The invitation unleashed a flood of raised hands as students realized their president genuinely wanted to engage with their authentic concerns rather than deliver a scripted speech. Madame Traoré looked nervous about what her young students might ask the nation's leader, but Traoré's encouraging smile suggested he welcomed even challenging inquiries. 10-year-old Ibrahim, named after the president himself, stood up with remarkable poise. Mr. President, my father says politicians make promises they never keep. How do we know you're different? The question's directness surprised the adults in the room, but Traoré nodded approvingly at the boy's courage in asking what many adult voters wanted to know, but rarely had the opportunity to pose directly. That's an excellent question, Ibrahim, he replied seriously. Your father is right to be skeptical. Too many politicians have broken promises to people like your family. The only honest answer I can give you is this. Judge me by my actions, not my words. If I fail to improve your school, your health care, your family's opportunities, then you should demand better leadership. The children murmured among themselves, clearly impressed by their president's willingness to accept accountability rather than make defensive excuses. 7-year-old Aisha raised her hand next. Why do some countries have so much money while we have so little? Did we do something wrong? The question touched on complex issues of global economics and historical exploitation that would challenge university professors, but Traoré recognized the importance of providing these children with an age-appropriate understanding of their country's challenges. Africa is not poor because we did anything wrong, Aisha, he explained carefully. Our continent has more natural resources, gold, oil, minerals, than almost anywhere else in the world. The problem has been that other countries have taken these resources without giving us fair payment, and sometimes our own leaders have helped them do this. He moved closer to the children, his voice taking on the tone of someone sharing an important secret. But here's what those people don't understand. Africa's greatest resource isn't gold or oil. It's you. Young, intelligent, creative people who will build the future. They can steal our minerals, but they can't steal your minds or your determination. 9-year-old Fatu stood up boldly. Mr. President, why don't you have bodyguards with you today? Aren't you scared something might happen? The question highlighted the unprecedented nature of Traoré's casual visit, which had bypassed normal security protocols in favor of authentic connection with citizens. I do have security officers, Fatu, but I asked them to stay outside because I wanted to talk with you the same way I would talk with my own children, he replied. Fear is the enemy of leadership. If I'm afraid to sit in a classroom with the children I'm supposed to serve, then I'm not worthy of being your president. The answer demonstrated a philosophy of leadership that prioritized accessibility over protection, connection over isolation, principles that would soon spread across social media as students shared recordings of their president's remarkable statement. 8-year-old Musa raised his hand with obvious excitement. Can I become president too when I grow up? Not only can you become president, Musa, Traoré responded with genuine enthusiasm, I'm counting on it. Democracy means we get to choose our leaders, and I want you to study hard so that one day you can lead this country better than I have. The revolutionary idea that a poor child from Koudougou could aspire to the highest office in the land sparked animated discussions among the students, who began sharing their own leadership dreams with each other. 11-year-old Mariam asked a question that would particularly resonate with audiences beyond Burkina Faso. Mr. President, why do people in other countries think African children are only good for feeling sorry for? We're smart too. The question's sophistication impressed everyone present while highlighting a young person's awareness of how Africa was often portrayed in international media. You're absolutely right, Mariam, Traoré replied passionately. The world has been taught to see Africa as a place of problems rather than solutions, victims rather than victors. But you and your classmates prove them wrong every day. When you solve mathematical problems, write beautiful stories, or help each other learn, you're showing the world what African excellence looks like. He paused, looking directly at each child in turn. I need you to remember something very important. When you succeed, when you achieve your dreams, you're not just helping yourself. You're changing how the world sees all African children. You carry the hopes of an entire continent. The weight and inspiration of these words would prove particularly powerful when shared across social media platforms, where African youth in dozens of countries would find validation and motivation in a president's direct acknowledgement of their potential and importance. As the question session continued, each exchange revealed more of Traoré's remarkable ability to address complex issues in language that children could understand, while inspiring them to see themselves as agents of change rather than passive recipients of circumstances beyond their control. As the question session continued, President Traoré noticed that many children had become increasingly animated, whispering excitedly among themselves as they processed his unconventional answers. The energy in the classroom had transformed from polite attention to genuine engagement, with students clearly viewing this as more than a ceremonial visit from a distant authority figure. 12-year-old Adama, the oldest student in the mixed-age classroom, stood up with the serious demeanor of someone preparing to ask a particularly important question. Mr. President, you talk about us becoming leaders and changing things, but adults always say children should be quiet and follow orders. How can we be leaders if no one listens to us? The question struck at a fundamental tension in African societies between respect for elders and the need for younger voices to contribute to social change. Traoré recognized this as perhaps the most crucial question he would face during his visit. Adama, you've identified one of the biggest challenges facing our continent, he replied thoughtfully. Too often, we confuse respecting elders with silencing young voices. But here's what I want you to understand. Leadership isn't about age, it's about courage and wisdom. He moved to the center of the classroom, addressing all the children with increased intensity. Some of the most important changes in history have come from young people who refused to accept that things couldn't be better. In America, young people led the fight for civil rights. In South Africa, students helped end apartheid. Right here in Burkina Faso, young people like Thomas Sankara changed our country's direction. The reference to Sankara, whose name graced their school, resonated powerfully with students who had learned about the revolutionary leader's youth when he transformed the nation. But, Traoré continued, young leadership doesn't mean disrespecting elders or ignoring their experience. It means combining their wisdom with your energy and fresh ideas. It means asking good questions, like you're doing today, and not accepting answers that don't make sense. 10-year-old Aminata raised her hand eagerly. So we can disagree with adults if we think they're wrong? You can and should ask questions when something doesn't seem right, Traoré confirmed, but do it respectfully, with facts and good reasoning. The best leaders, whether they're 10 years old or 70, are those who can explain their ideas clearly and listen to others' perspectives. Daughter. He paused, then delivered what would become one of the most shared quotes from his entire visit. I'm going to tell you something that might surprise your teachers and parents. I want you to question everything, including what I'm telling you today. Don't believe something just because an adult says it, or because it's always been done that way. Ask why. Ask for evidence. Ask if there's a better way. Madame Caboret shifted uncomfortably at this encouragement of student questioning, but Traoré's next words addressed her concerns directly. This doesn't mean being disrespectful or disruptive, he clarified. It means being thoughtful, curious, and engaged. The best teachers, like Madame Caboret, love students who ask good questions because it means they're really learning, not just memorizing. The teacher relaxed visibly as she understood that the president was advocating for critical thinking rather than rebellion against authority. 9-year-old Rasmane stood up with obvious excitement. Mr. President, if we're supposed to be leaders, what should we start leading right now? We're just kids in school. The question provided Traoré with an opportunity to offer concrete guidance rather than abstract inspiration. Start with your classroom, he suggested. Lead by helping classmates who struggle with their studies. Lead by standing up to bullies. Lead by taking care of your school environment. Lead by encouraging each other to dream big and work hard. He gestured toward the windows, beyond which the rest of the school community was still gathered, trying to catch glimpses of the ongoing discussion. Then expand to your families. Help with household chores without being asked. Encourage younger siblings to study. Share what you learn in school with family members who didn't have educational opportunity. The practical nature of these suggestions made leadership feel achievable, rather than distant, inspiring several students to nod enthusiastically as they recognized opportunities they could pursue immediately. Most importantly, Traoré concluded, lead by example. Show through your actions that young Burkinabé are intelligent, responsible, and capable. Every time you demonstrate these qualities, you're changing how adults see young people's potential. 11-year-old Safiatou asked a question that would prove particularly viral when shared online. Mr. President, when you were our age, did you ever think you'd be talking to a president? And now you are the president talking to us. The observation's innocent profundity, the cyclical nature of inspiration and achievement, drew laughter from the adults present while highlighting the remarkable nature of the moment they were experiencing. You're absolutely right, Safiatou, Traoré replied with genuine delight. When I was sitting in a classroom like this, I never imagined I would one day be president. But more importantly, I never imagined I would have the privilege of talking with brilliant young people like all of you. He looked around the room with obvious emotion. 25 years from now, one of you might be sitting where I am, talking to another group of children about their dreams and possibilities. That's not just a nice idea. That's how change really happens, one generation inspiring the next to reach higher and achieve more. The power of this vision, children in a humble classroom being directly told they could become their nation's leaders, would prove irresistible to social media audiences seeking inspiration and hope for Africa's future. As his unscheduled visit approached its natural conclusion, President Traoré sensed that this conversation with the children of École Primaire Thomas Sankara had evolved into something far more significant than a casual school visit. The energy in the classroom was electric, with 43 young faces radiating excitement and possibility that hadn't existed when he first walked through their door. Before I leave, he announced, I want to make you a promise, but I also want you to make me a promise in return. The children leaned forward in their chairs, recognizing that their president was about to share something important that would conclude this extraordinary encounter. My promise to you is this: I will work every day to ensure that your school has the resources it needs, that your teachers are properly supported, and that you have opportunities to pursue your dreams regardless of your family's economic situation. Education will be the top priority of my administration because you are Burkina Faso's future. The practical nature of his commitment resonated with students who were acutely aware of their school's resource limitations and their family's financial constraints. But, he continued, promises only work when both sides fulfill their responsibilities. So here's what I need from you in return. He stood and began walking among the desks, making eye contact with individual students as he outlined his expectations. First, I need you to study hard, not because adults tell you to, but because knowledge is the one thing no one can ever take away from you. Whether you become doctors, teachers, engineers, farmers, or even presidents, learning will be your most powerful tool. Several students nodded solemnly, understanding that their president was asking for genuine commitment rather than empty promises. Second, I need you to help each other succeed. In too many places, people try to climb higher by stepping on others. I want you to climb higher by lifting others up with you. The classmate sitting next to you isn't your competition. They're your teammate in building a better Burkina Faso. The concept of collective success rather than individual competition challenged conventional thinking about achievement and success that many students had absorbed from various sources. Third, and most importantly, Traoré continued, his voice rising with passion, I need you to never, ever let anyone convince you that you're not smart enough, not worthy enough, or not important enough to achieve your dreams. When people tell you that poor children can't become leaders, remember this conversation. Remember that your president started where you are today. The emotional impact of these words was visible throughout the classroom, with several children wiping away tears as they absorbed the revolutionary idea that their current circumstances didn't determine their future possibilities. I want you to take out your phones, he announced, surprising everyone present. I want you to record what I'm about to say so you can share it with your families, your friends, and anyone else who needs to hear it. Dozens of mobile phones emerged from backpacks and pockets as students prepared to capture their president's final message. To every young person in Burkina Faso, across Africa, and around the world who might see this video, you are not accidents of history. You are not problems to be solved or burdens to be carried. You are solutions waiting to happen, leaders waiting to emerge, and changes waiting to transform our world. The power of this direct address to youth beyond the classroom created a moment that would indeed viral across social media platforms, inspiring young people throughout Africa and the diaspora. The adults who tell you to lower your expectations, to accept limitations, to be grateful for scraps, they mean well, but they're wrong. I'm asking you to be unreasonable. Be unreasonably ambitious. Be unreasonably optimistic. Be unreasonably determined to prove that African youth can compete with anyone, anywhere, in any field. The students were now recording enthusiastically, recognizing that they were documenting something historically significant. Your skin color is not a limitation. It's a heritage of strength and resilience. Your accent is not an embarrassment. It's the sound of authentic African voices that the world needs to hear. Your poverty is not permanent. It's a starting point that will make your eventual success even more meaningful. As he prepared to conclude, Traoré's voice took on the tone of someone delivering a sacred charge. I'm leaving you with the most important responsibility any generation has ever received, proving that Africa's time has come, not through violence or hatred, but through excellence, innovation, and unshakable belief in yourselves. The final moment of his visit became a spontaneous celebration as students stood and applauded, many continuing to record as their classmates cheered and their teachers wiped away tears of inspiration and pride. Remember, Traoré called out over the enthusiastic response, today you met your president. Tomorrow I might meet mine when one of you takes my place. Study hard, dream big, and make me proud. As he waved goodbye and headed toward the door, students rushed to shake his hand, take selfies, and express their gratitude for this life-changing encounter. The videos they had recorded would be uploaded within hours, spreading across social media platforms and inspiring millions of young Africans who recognized their own dreams and struggles in the president's words. The unplanned visit to École Primaire Thomas Sankara would be remembered as the moment when a president reminded an entire generation that their circumstances of birth need not limit their destinations in life, and that African youth possessed unlimited potential, waiting to transform not just their continent, but the entire world.